Hello and welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast, English Breakfast edition. My name is Kris, I am your host, and we have, of course, brought to you in partnership with classicfootballshirts.co.uk. Whether you are full hipster or classic collector, they have something for you. Packed show as always this week to get straight into things, so I shall waste no time and introduce my guests this evening. First up, our regular two co-hosts. Good evening, Josh.
Good evening.
And good evening, Ross.
Evening.
And our newest recruit, the man we got on a season-long contract from La Liga, which of course will be making him a permanent offer of pasties and cider. It's good evening to Mr. Joel Meloir. Evening, Joel.
Good evening.
And welcome to your first taste of our English breakfast supper, if you will.
Good to be here.
Good stuff. And you were at a game this week, which we will come to shortly. But we're going to start. We couldn't start anywhere else, could we? Ross, Stamford Bridge, Chelsea, coming into this game on frankly impenetrable run. They're on a cakewalk to the title, it would appear. And then Crystal Palace rocked up. And stuff happened and things. And Palace won by 2-1. Talk me through it. What was your thoughts?
I thought it was a game that I don't think anyone in the world would have predicted. 2-1 to Palace is just one of those balmy results that I don't think anyone would have called, and is still shocking to look at now, even though I've seen it all and I've seen how they played. And to be fair, Crystal Palace were very good defensively, especially in the second half, organised very well, as you kind of expect under a Sam Allardyce team. And Sacco on loan from Liverpool. He looks like he's completely rejuvenated that back line at the moment. He's in complete command of it, and he did very, very well to keep Chelsea out for as long as they did yesterday. But I still can't really get over the actual scoreline, because despite how good the recent run has been for Palace, you just look at a Chelsea game and you just think it's a write-off, you know. But they had a free swing, 2 very good goals from Sahar and Benteke. I thought Benteke's was extremely cheeky. So it's you can't do anything else but tip your hat to Crystal Palace. But I'm still surprised by it. It's a crazy result.
It really is. It really is a surprising result. And Josh, where does this? Is this any sort of a wobble for Chelsea? I mean, you know, they've been, as we say, they've been superb all season. I think, you know, most of us on this pod called them as champions pre-season, and they've done nothing to change our minds. Is it just a wobble? Is it one of those games where you can just keep winning and then all of a sudden, in Premier League in particular, does this? It just throws up a weird result. Or with Man City on the horizon, I think it's Wednesday, is this grounds for Chelsea to be just refocusing their approach once again?
I think this is an anomaly on Chelsea's season, to be honest. I think it's nothing more than that. They're still 7 points clear. They've got a game in hand on Liverpool as well. I really don't see this as anything more than just a blip. They can still afford to lose a couple of games, but I think the way that Conte's got this team running, he won't let them lose another game. I think the title is still theirs to lose, and I still think they'll have it wrapped up by a couple of games to go.
Yes, I concur with that. And Joel, as a man who's having a look at Hull, sort of close on the doorstep, as it were, does this result pretty much guarantee Palace are safe and free and over the hills? Because I remember when Allardyce lost, was it 4-0 away at home to Sunderland, I should say?
Yeah.
People thought, is it going to work? But he seems to have finally got them playing his way, and I don't think anyone would have seen this coming. So are they safe now completely, do you think?
In any given circumstance in a normal season, expect the run they've just put together, the mini run, kind of, it would have made them practically safe. But everyone else is kind of picking up points. So obviously Hull won yesterday, and Swansea got a draw today, but Clement's done well since he's gone in there. So Palace have not really pulled away from the pack. So you kind of looked at yesterday, and I was quite surprised when I looked at the table last night that they're only still 16th on 31 points, and Hull are on 27 points. in 18, so that there's not a great gap in between where you'd expect Palace to be after putting that run together. But looking at Palace's team, they have got quality, and I think that quality now is starting to show. There seems to be a lot more confidence in Benteke, Zaha, Kabay seems to be playing better, so I can only see Palace pushing on and guaranteeing survival. And they've got Allardyce, who is kind of the master of doing what he's doing, so I think they should be fine. But at the minute, I don't think they are safe, no.
And trip to Southampton on Wednesday, so obviously a guaranteed 6-0 thumping there, eh, Ross?
Yeah.
But yeah, 4 straight wins for Palace. Sticking with you then, Joel, let's talk about Hull. You mentioned them there. They got a 2-1 victory over West Ham yesterday. 2 things I noticed from this in particular. One, it was a come-from-behind victory, which if you want a sign that a club is, potentially going to go on a run and maybe get themselves out of trouble, that's a good sign because it shows that heart and desire. And two goals from defenders, one from Andrea Ranocchia, of all people. What do you make of Hull? Because obviously you, people who don't know or might not have heard you before, you follow Barcelona, but Hull are kind of your local team, so you got to the K-Coms quite a bit, and you were there yesterday.
As many home games I can get there, so I was there yesterday. The way, it's a strange one with Marco Silva. He's done so well since he's gone in, and tactically, I was talking to a friend about it last night, tactically he's probably the best manager Hull have ever had. What's really strange about him, and we are coming from behind quite a bit, is he can change games, he can change tactics within a game, and he can change a system within a game to a positive effect. What he does seem to struggle with, and as a team what we struggle with, is starting with the right tactics. So I can't quite understand that, because obviously he can see it on a line what's going wrong and what's not working and make a change like he did yesterday, yet he can plan all week for a game, and invariably, not to say he gets it wrong, but we don't seem to quite set up well. So that's a really odd thing. Yesterday he made a fantastic change and brought on Grzycki at half time, and it completely changed the game. You could argue he's set up with the wrong team. You can, that is an argument leveled against him, but he is so good tactically at doing what he's doing. And at set pieces yesterday, we did look a threat, and obviously the winning goal by Ranocchia was a really kind of a good move. Really poor marking, as we said, by West Ham, but it was a really good header by Ranocchia.
Well, and do you back them? Is there enough there for Hull to get out? I mean, they seem to be the club that it's a little bit of a tight pack, isn't it? We'll touch on the other 2 teams below them, but there's something there, isn't there? It's like Ross has just put in our chat. They're unbeaten in 3. Silva hasn't lost a home game in 3 years. Wow, that's impressive.
A league game in home in 3 years. Yeah, and I think the Mike Freeland had to leave. That it happened too late, and Silva's come in. He's done so well. The fans massively behind him. He's got the players on side, and we can't defend. I think we concede a lot of goals, but positively we always look like we're going to score, and I think that's a great thing for Hull, is that they keep looking like they're going to score. Even yesterday when they won, then you still feel they're going to create chances. He has to get 2 up front to get Abel Hernandez with bodies around him, so he's got Omar Niasse, who's doing really well. So there is definitely belief that Hull can stay up. Since he walked in, that belief has been there. It's been really strange. I've never known the Hull fans take to a manager as quickly as they have Marco Silva, and I think they're desperate to hang on to him no matter what happens, but there is definitely belief that they can stay up, and that's coming from the players as well. In interviews that you see locally, they are kind of the belief that they're going to stay up, and they've got some good home fixtures. I think since he's been in, he's won 5 out of 6 at home, which is massive. So they can just get a couple of points away on the road, then they should be fine.
Huge game on Wednesday as well, home to Middlesbrough.
Yeah, and obviously Borough will take something from what they've done at Swansea today and getting a draw. It's a difficult one for Borough. Do they come and open up and try and go for the win because they need points on the board now, or do they sit in for a draw? The difficult one to work out, Borough. They're not going to score, but they are really tight defensively. But you kind of feel if they put a little bit more into attack, are they going to loosen it off in defence and then leave themselves susceptible and lose the game, or is a draw a good result for them? I don't know. It's a calculated risk no matter what Borough come and do. I think Hull can afford to draw that one just. I think certainly the pressure is on Borough.
Absolutely, and that's a nice little segue into that. We're going to jump all over the place on this week's pod because I want to kind of focus on individual areas. So, Ross, Middlesbrough away at Swansea today, a 0-0 draw. Would it be fair to say that result doesn't really suit either side? I mean, Swansea, the home side, would have been looking to take maximum points. They've just sort of dropped off again recently, 2 losses and a draw. And then Borough, I mean, they just don't score goals, do they? They don't really do a lot, do they? To be perfectly honest, I mean, they just look like a side that is just a bit of a mess. Can you see either of these two sides looking at a point as a positive result?
I can see Swansea taking the positives from it. I don't see Middlesbrough seeing too many positives in it. I mean, I've been saying all season long that you compare Middlesbrough to what they were in the Championship especially, and they just completely lost their identity. They tried to be something they weren't. And I remember saying at the start of the season they were a bit of a glass cannon, and it was the defence that was the problem, and they had a great attack. So they completely switched focus, and for the entire season they've now been so defensively solid they've forgotten how to go forward. And obviously we know Adama Traore as well, who's so highly thought of as barely getting a kick for some bizarre reason. So I think for them, under Steve Agnew now, who I think is trying to make them a bit more like the Leicester City kind of mould in terms of structure and hitting hard on the counter with the pace they've got in the side, you would have looked at this and thought, right, Swansea are a good team to be facing, but again they've drawn a blank. Like Joel was just saying, defensively they're still very good, so they've managed to keep a clean sheet, which is very important in the run-in, but I think both sides will be disappointed they didn't get a win from this, but I think Swansea will see a few more positives in it than Middlesbrough will.
Yeah, I do think you're probably right. Just in it just needed a goal, didn't it? That game, it just sort of was constantly on the edge from what I saw anyway. Josh, the other team down there, obviously Sunderland. Sorry, I'm giving you the short straw a little bit here, but a 1-0 defeat to Watford yesterday. Britos with the winning goal, and in the 59th minute. Is this? I mean, it's a slow, painful death, isn't it? Like Sunderland are like the old Yeller. They've been taken out the back. The leash has been let off. They're just loading the bullets, aren't they? Because I just can't see any way that Sunderland can amass. They need 8 points to even get out of the relegation zone. At the moment, we can't even see them getting 1 point. Are they officially doomed, do you think? Is this the result that almost encapsulates how they've been getting on?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there. Sunderland have been not particularly great in recent weeks, and that coupled with going to a Watford team who have flattered to deceive all season, really hasn't helped them. The fixtures they've got coming up, just going through them, I can't see where they're going to get the points that they need. There's a couple in there that you could say they've got to play Hull at the beginning of May, but as we've said, that's away at Hull, and Hull's form, and particularly the manager's form at home in league games, is perfect. I don't think they're going to pick up any points anywhere, to be honest. Unless they get something lucky, they've still got to play Man United, still got to play Middlesbrough. They've got Chelsea on the last day. They've also got to play Swansea as well. So the only thing that could really help them is if the teams that they're coming to play have already got their flip-flops on and just don't really turn up to the games. But I can't see that happening.
I think Sunderland are actually playing in flip-flops at the moment, to be honest. I mean, somebody wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I think the thing with Sunderland is they went yesterday to Watford and played one up front and lost. And you kind of feel that is at the stage now for Moyes to gamble somewhat and try and be a little bit more positive and put at least 2 up front. I know you can argue it's a 4-5-1, 4-3-3, but invariably with Sunderland it ends up with Defoe being so isolated. And then they lose the game, so they might as well throw caution to the wind now. They're so far behind everyone else. But is Moyes going to change that? I don't know what the long-term strategy is for Sunderland or even the short-term this season. Now, they're so reliant on Defoe. I know Anachibi is a big loss for them, but you just feel like they should maybe just be a bit more positive in the games that they've got left.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You do. I hate to use the cliche, but Ross, is it? I think we've mentioned this before on the pod, but is it kind of a case of it's the Newcastle effect almost, where you almost see Sunderland as being a club that need to go down to rebuild? I guess the flip side of that to that argument is, could they end up as a Bolton or a Coventry or insert another club here that has dropped down the divisions and kept going? Because I was listening to a phone in yesterday, and I believe they obviously went to New York, didn't they, for this jolly? They then sacked a load of the staff. One apparently is a fanzine editor. who has been voted Fanzine Editor of the Year 13 years in a row, like across all the Premier League, and they fired this guy. It does sort of, other than another club we'll come on to in a minute, it reeks of a club that's just in disarray, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I don't think you can compare this directly to Newcastle, because while Newcastle was a very painful, slow demise over a series of years, this season... Well, the season Newcastle went down didn't feel as drab as it has for Sunderland. This year has felt like death by a thousand cuts for Sunderland. And I've been saying for a while that Sunderland do need to get relegated. You know, it's not a pleasant thing that can happen to a club, but when you go down, invariably there are players that then say, right, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to be playing at Premier League level. You manage to get some players out, you manage to get some new players in, it completely rejuvenates the squad. You look at a club like Aston Villa, who last season I said the same, they needed to go down. They did, now under Steve Bruce. You look at the starting 11 that played on the weekend, you barely recognise it, and it's a much more cohesive unit. So Sunderland do need to go down, but you do make the good point that they do really, really, really run the risk of becoming a Wolves, and Wolves are the ones I point to as a direct comparison to Sunderland, because Wolves came down from the Premier League and everyone kind of thought, oh well, they've got enough there, you know, they'll probably be in and around at least the top 10 and they'll relegate the next year, you know, and no one saw it coming. But if you looked at the squad they'd taken down with them, it wasn't good enough and they didn't do enough in the summer. Sunderland, I think that the team they're going to be taking down with them isn't going to be good enough. It will then depend on whether or not they're going to get the finance to then reinvest. And they're not Newcastle. They don't have the same kind of money, and they don't have the same kind of pull as they do. So it will be very, very tough. And I think with David Moyes in charge, I think they're not going to find themselves in a relegation scrap next year. But a lot will depend on the kind of quality they can find and bring in.
It is one of those, isn't it? As you rightly say, it could go either way. So yes, plenty of work for Sunderland to do, and you'd think they need a massive clear out. And to be honest, I'm not sure I see David Moyes staying there long term. I think he'd be happy to stay there, but I'm not sure the fans would be happy to have him.
I think the chairman is a very long time fan of David Moyes, so he may go to bat for him. But if the fans want him or not is a different question. I don't have my finger on the pulse on that one. So.
Yeah, and of course, as we all know, such managerial heavyweights as Owen Coyle are still available, so you never know. Okay, Josh, Burnley, are they in trouble? Simple question. They lost to Spurs yesterday, 2-0, at home. Of course, their famous home record is what's been keeping them up in the table, but goals from Dyer and Hyun-Min Son. We'll come on to Spurs in a minute, but Burnley now 32 points. Technically, that is only 5 points above the drop zone, so... Yeah, are they looking over their shoulders a little bit?
Yeah, I think they still need to be targeting that kind of magical 40 points, but they have got the fixtures coming up to do so. I don't think that they're going to have any trouble picking up more points. They've got a more manageable fixture at home in Stoke on Tuesday. I think they can get a result at home. As you say, their form is very, very good, but they've just come off the back of 4 straight away games where their form hasn't been particularly good. So I think it's just a case of getting used to their surroundings again and building up that momentum. And I think they have got everything they need to stay up. I think their May period is very, very easy for them in relative terms. They've got West Brom at home, they've got Bournemouth away and West Ham on the last game of the season. I think that would be more than enough for them to stay up in the league.
Yeah, I suppose Joel, also touching on another club that's around. Obviously, you saw Hull beat West Ham yesterday. Same question I could pose that I've posed about Burnley. West Ham, 4 straight defeats and a draw in the last 5. Minus 13 goal difference isn't exactly clever. As we mentioned earlier, went ahead at the KCOM and then ended up losing. Next 3 fixtures: away at Arsenal, enough said, home to Swansea, and away at Sunderland. It's quite a big fortnight for West Ham, isn't it?
It is, and the first half yesterday they played well, but then when Hull kind of turned the screw in the second half, they did look like they could score at any given opportunity. So they are in trouble. I don't think the off the field element with Bilic, is he going to be there, is he not? That needs clarifying. I think they are in trouble, West Ham. They're a team that they've had a lot of changes here. I think this year, for a number of reasons, has been difficult for them. Losing Payet was big, and bringing in Snodgrass, who's not really done much since he's come in, hasn't helped either. You kind of don't know what you're going to get with them, but you look at, like you said, the fixtures, and that is going to be difficult for them to get anything from that. And like we said previously, if the teams below keep winning, that gap is going to get shorter to West Ham, and they could find themselves in a scrap.
Yeah, I agree. They're a side, West Ham. They're very. I use the word bipolar a lot on this pod. I should probably find a better word, but they do seem to be very erratic in their form. Is a better word. They're just, sometimes you watch them and you think, yeah, they're quite impressive. Other times you watch them and you think.
Personally, I think they're transitioning. I think they've transitioned the wrong way. Because they had this the team they started the season with. They did so well with last season, and they had a few dud signings. You look at Zaza as a key example, and Caleri, the guy on loan from, is it Boca that he's on loan from? Either way,
yes, I think it's Cagliari. Yes, I know the one you mean. Anyway. Yeah.
I mean, they had some dodgy signings over the summer, to be fair to them, but it was still a very good, enterprising, attacking team. What they've done now is they've replaced Payet with Snodgrass, as we just said. But Snodgrass is a championship, get stuck in, kick the player as well as the ball kind of player, Whereas Payet was a lot more silk. And with Font now going in there, I mean, I'm still a big lover of Jose Font, but since he's gone in there, he's been awful, and they haven't kept a clean sheet since he moved there. They've kind of gone for this championship, one of the people kind of player who the fans can get behind, because it's been a bit sticky this season, and it feels like the completely wrong direction. Compared to where they were at the start of the season, it feels like they've tried to add a bit of steel, and all it's really done is lose their identity a bit for me.
They kind of set up yesterday with a 4-4-2. But their best player, and probably the best player on the pitch, was Manuel Lanzini. But he was playing in midfield too, and he didn't have the freedom just in a free role to go and do what he wanted to. I think if West Ham are going to move forward immediately this season, they need to give Lanzini the role that Payet had, where he's practically can do what he wants, where he wants, because he's so influential for the team. It did all go through him yesterday, but defensively, he isn't good enough to play in midfield too. It's not his game. So I think that's something Bilic needs to address. And for Gulli, obviously, I watched a lot of Spanish football. He was great for Valencia, but he's just another sign for West Ham that's not really done it, for whatever reason that is. And they did miss Antonio and Winston Reid yesterday. They're two massive players for them, that if they get them back, they've got a much better chance.
I think their signings in general have been a little bit odd, because I think as soon as Payet left, I said they should be building the team around Lanzini, and they have when they've moved to that midfield five. But when they move away from it, you see that Lanzini, as you said, doesn't really have the influence on the games. I think their transfer policy in general has been very off this season. I don't understand what they've been doing with any of the players that they've brought in, full stop. It's just been very odd. Letting Valencia go, although he may not be good enough for them, he was better than bringing in Zaza and putting all your eggs in a Diafra Sakho brittle basket, because the guy's not there for them, and he definitely would have got some game time, especially with Andy Carroll as well, being so injury prone. You've got a forward line that's completely inconsistent, so the creative players are on a hiding to nothing.
Yeah, they've not got enough out of Andre Ayew either. They paid 20 million for him from Swansea. I know he got injured, but since he's come back into him, he's not done a great deal. And again, they've put a lot of their eggs in that basket with him, because that was £20 million, which is a big outlay for West Ham. So I just feel they need to stay up and get to the summer and probably start again. I know that sounds a radical thing to do, but I just think they need an identity, West Ham. You don't know how they're going to set up and how they're going to play from one week to the next, and that's never a good thing.
No, I agree with you. I remember saying to Ross, actually, I think it's Ross anyway, I remember saying that, Ross, we had the conversation, didn't we, pre-season, when they were, I think, was it David Gold, who's notoriously a bit of a prat, I think it's fair to say, all over Twitter and saying, we're going to sign this player, we're going to sign, Lacazette, we can get Walcott on a £50,000 or a £50 million deal, and it's just like, they were aiming way above the area that they were, I think, for the club they are, and they are a quote-unquote big London name side, but with the transition into the stadium and the Payet obviously situation, there's so much going on. They just seem to be aiming for something that was just not achievable so soon. So I think you're right. I think the signings need to be a lot better, and the future of the manager, that needs to be clarified, because we'll come on to clubs about managers and futures in a second, but it can't help. It can't help. But that's West Ham dealt with. Ross, do you want to have 30 seconds to talk about the thriller that was Southampton 0, Bournemouth 0? wasn't a lot going on here. Two things I should probably ask you about, really. The penalty, of course, which I actually thought should have been retaken, but I don't know if I'm alone on this. And Southampton's lack of being able to finish without a certain Italian centre forward. Discuss.
Yeah, well, we've reverted to type, unfortunately, with Gabbiadini and Van Dijk out again. Well, I say again, but Van Dijk's been out for about 3 months, as we know. But with them both gone, we've kind of gone back to where we were November time, where again we didn't have Van Dijk around, and the strikers were out of form, and we just couldn't score. Defence looked okay, but we just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. And again, this weekend against Bournemouth, we had some very good chances, especially inside the first half hour. Didn't take any of them. If we'd taken one of them, I think we would have probably gone on to have won the game. But you know, it just got so stodgy after that, and Bournemouth started to grow more into the game. They got a bit more offensive. They started to figure out that they had to mark Dusan Tadic, because for the first 30 minutes, realistically speaking, for the first 60 minutes, honestly, no one really seemed to know who was meant to be the one picking up Tadic. When Boufal came on, they had a very similar issue, but when they brought Wilshere on in the second half, they filled in that gap and became a lot more offensive. And as the game went on, you thought Bournemouth would be the ones to get the goal. As for the penalty, it's the second time that an opponent has taken a penalty from that penalty spot this season and skied it over the bar, because we had Harry Kane miss a penalty for Tottenham there as well, and it was the same issue. He took the kick and half the turf came up with it. Now, I know you're arguing there was a double kick in it. I don't really care, because I'm glad he missed it. I'm glad he didn't get the chance to take it again, but I find it very odd that penalty spot, ever since the Inter Milan game, I can't remember which player it was that took a dig at it, but it was one of the players that took a dig at it when Tadic's penalty was given. And that the penalty spot's never recovered from it. I don't know what the groundsman's doing, but it seems like any penalty that gets taken from that spot now just doesn't go in. So very strange, but I'm not going to grumble too much, because it did save us a point. So it was a bit of a flat game. I think both sides would be unhappy to have lost it, but certainly Bournemouth, with the penalty and the Afobe chance as well, they really should have been getting something from that.
Yeah, it was one of those games I just couldn't work out how it ended 0-0. There's so many opportunities and just some really poor finishing. Just a quick question as well I want to ask you. Jay Rodriguez, is his future at Southampton, or is he going through the motions a bit? Because it looks to me like a player who's he's doing his club a job right now while Manolo Gabbiadini's out injured. But I don't know what it is. It just feels like he needs a bit of a fresh start, maybe. Do you think that's fair, or would you keep him around?
Would I keep him around? Yes, until we got an extra body in. My understanding, though, is that the club kind of feel like it's time for us to part ways, because we probably all remember the England form he was in 2014, and then that was stopped dead by his knee injury against Manchester City. And ever since then, he's either been injured again, or he just hasn't either been in form or hasn't had the run of consistent games, and you can see it in his performances. You know, his touch isn't there, his movement's not there. He's not that killer player he was when he was playing for England a few years back. So the internal feeling in the club is that everyone loves Jay Rodriguez and that we want to keep him, but it does just kind of feel like at the moment he's not what we need. You know, if we were lower in the league, then I think we would have stuck with him, but we have ambitions of getting back into Europe next season, so I suspect he'll be on his way. But for me personally, I'd keep him until the replacement can be sourced.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. There's a few names being touted around. I see Daniel Sturridge's name isn't going away from Southampton links. I'm not sure Claude Puel would put up with his lack of work rate, but then he has got Sofiane Boufal, so yeah, anything's possible. Interesting. Okay, so we've got just another quick line, Josh, on Leicester. We're not going to spend too much time on them, because we all know that since they've turned into a sort of a green slithery creature, everything is well with Leicester again. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But 4 straight wins. They got a 2-0 victory over Stoke yesterday. Pretty straightforward from what I can gather. Goals from Ndidi and Vardy. Just carries on, doesn't it, really, for Leicester? I think that's probably them just about safe now. I presume you think Shakespeare is doing a good job?
Yeah, you can't take anything away from Shakespeare, as much as we'd like to, through the way that he appears to have engineered himself into the managerial position. But he's got the team doing what they weren't doing earlier in the season. And the first goal from Ndidi is just an absolute belter from about 30 yards or so. But they're just gone back to the Leicester that won the league last season, I think, that kind of buccaneering style. And yeah, they're certainly safe with the form they've got behind them to continue moving on. I think there's certainly 6 worse teams behind them, maybe a couple more, especially on current form.
Yeah, it does appear that all is well in the Leicester world once again. Right, Joel, there was obviously quite a large couple of games, or I say quite a large couple of games, that's terrible grammar. There were a couple of large games this weekend. It all started off with the Merseyside derby, Liverpool 3, Everton 1. What do you? I'll let you sort of pick from this. What would you like to talk about? Everton's lack of discipline and essentially sort of just seemingly giving up on the game. Do you want to talk about Ronald Koeman being a little bit of a bitch, or do you want to talk about how good Liverpool were on the day?
I think the one I've got a bit of sympathy for Koeman in the respect that he lost in this international window. He lost Schneiderlin, McCarthy, Funes Mori, and Coleman to injury. Just before Merseyside derby at Anfield, so it wasn't the best prep for them. I think the one thing that came out of this game for me was Pennington came in and kind of played the right side of a back 3 or a back 4 of Everton, kind of interchange in that first half, and he got massively exposed. And I think that is the brutality of the Premier League. That although he scored, of course he scored, but his naivety for the second goal was unbelievable, where he kind of showed Coutinho onto kind of inside onto his right foot and allowed him to put it in. A wonderful goal, but I think that just shows you the level of the Premier League, that a weakness will be exposed and exposed quite quickly. And I think if you're being really harsh, Pennington could even be blamed for the first goal as well. So I think coming at it from a different angle, I do feel for Everton, because losing those 4 players before such a big game is not great, but then the replacements that came in weren't kind of what they needed, and I think tactically they may be set up wrong. I don't think Tom Davies or Idrissa Gueye got close enough to Liverpool in midfield, and Barkley we can talk forever and a day about Barkley, but Barkley didn't contribute anything to the game other than probably should have been sent off for 2 yellows or even a straight red for the one, I think it was on Lovren.
Yes.
So it wasn't a great day at all for Everton yesterday, and I think that it raises more questions about Lukaku as well. Should he do more himself, or should the team do more for Lukaku? I think you can look at that 2 ways.
We'll come on to him in a moment. Rubs hands together. Ross, before we come on to Lukaku, what do you make? Obviously, you had Ronald Koeman as a manager at Southampton. You know, we all heard what you said last year about the fan base from Saints when he left, and he essentially did a bit of an FU to Southampton, and off he went to Everton. He was very spiky, wasn't he? It's almost like the issue he had in midweek with Roy Keane and Ireland, Martin O'Neill as well. Of course, he had a bit of a ding dong, didn't he? There, it's almost like it spilled into this game, because he was quite chopsy with Jurgen Klopp, wasn't he, after the game, and he had some comments about how the Liverpool manager was quote unquote conducting himself. So what do you sort of make of Koeman? Is he having a little bit of a meltdown, or is it, like Joel said, just a bit of frustration at the week he's had?
It is, but Koeman's always had this petulant streak in him. He did it with us a couple of times after some international breaks. He came out afterwards and had a moan at the international managers because a couple of players came back injured or tired or whatever it might be. So he's always been a bit of a prickly character. So it doesn't overly shock me to see him getting on his high horse about injuries now. But I think Martin O'Neill's rebuttal was quite good. I can't remember the exact wording of it now. I'd have to go and find it. But Martin O'Neill's original rebuttal to Koeman's anger was also very, very good. And sometimes Koeman just loses sight of the fact that there are other teams in the world and there are other managers in the world that need to use his players, and players themselves have ambitions of doing other things on the international stage. So he does have to temper it, but at the same time it's just kind of who he is. You know, he will flare up every once in a while.
Does seem a little bit prickly. As for the game, Josh, is this Liverpool sort of announcing that they are kind of quote unquote back, or, and this is the big caveat, their first goal scorer, Sadio Mane, of course, picking up what looked to be a fairly sore-looking knee injury. He got his studs kind of caught in the turf and a nasty fall towards the end. Is it all not all built around him? But when you lose Mane, is there sort of that concern that Liverpool could go back to revert to type almost, the Liverpool that we saw pre or post Christmas?
Yeah, he's certainly a key player for Liverpool in the way that they go about their business, and we saw whilst he was away over the Africa Cup of Nations that their form just completely dipped they now look like the team that everybody's going to be targeting behind them to try and sneak that position off them in the top four, especially as they've played more games than everyone else around them, with the fact that they've dropped out of cup competitions earlier than the likes of Man City and Arsenal. I think the only blessing for them with that is perhaps they've got Origi coming back into some kind of form, and perhaps he can take up the mantle and they can move Firmino back onto the wing.
Yeah, it seems to be where he's better placed, I think. Or it's a weird one because he's got better as a centre forward for Firmino, but I think someone like Origi gives you that pace in behind, and he scored a very good goal as well. Joel, interesting goalkeeping from your namesake, Joel Robles, for that third goal. Kind of symptomatic of how Everton defended. I think, is it Ashley Williams as well, was culpable for a lot of very poor decision making and a rather ugly rake of the studs down. Was it Emre Can's back? So Everton, without those players injured, very questionable, wasn't it? Especially that piece of goalkeeping for that third goal.
Yeah, I don't think next season Joe Robles will be Everton's number one. I think they kind of put the hat on Stecklenburg, who started the season appallingly and kind of was subsequently dropped. And I think Robles is a backup. So I think a goalkeeper will be what Everton will be certainly looking for in the summer. I just think when they've got kind of Jagielka's probably had his day now, wouldn't automatically be a starter. I just think all those factors contributed, and then it's a Merseyside derby as well. Just a really bad day at the office for Everton and for Koeman, and probably why he was so prickly post-match.
Yeah, agreed. It's not been a good week for Mr. Koeman, but good result for Liverpool and Mr. Klopp, who of course sort of strengthen their hold in their league position at the moment, which currently is third. We should also talk about Manchester United, who we can't let go under the radar. Ross, would it be fair to say that the manager's post-match interview was more of an interest than the game itself? West Brom obviously came to Old Trafford with one thing in mind. I did think it was very interesting, the sort of fallout of this game. It was classic Mourinho. You can fill in our listeners on what was said if you like, but I thought it was very interesting that Arsenal obviously got absolutely pelted for, quite rightly, a poor performance against West Brom pre-international games. But yet Manchester United have kind of got away with this a little bit, in that not many people are talking about the fact they couldn't score, and only managed 3 shots on target. So for all this dominance, was Mourinho right? Did he have a point about the line of questioning from the interview afterwards?
For me, yes, but then again, I'm a Mourinho fan, so maybe I'm biased. I think the credit has to go to West Brom and their defensive performance. I don't think you can just say that they turn up against Man United and Man United should win 2-0, so we should be massively shocked when they draw 0-0. I think you should give massive credit to West Brom and the way Pulis sets his sides up, especially in games where he knows they're completely outclassed. The question that annoyed Mourinho was, did the two teams cancel each other out? Which is a bit of a silly question, because there wasn't a case of cancelling each other out. It was just Man United completely in control and West Brom sitting back and defending for their lives. Mourinho's interpretation of it was, are they just two very good teams going at it hell for leather, and have they just kind of both fizzled out in the end? That was his interpretation of it. Whereas the question was, I'm sure, was it just attack against defence, and did both teams just do really well and West Brom edged it? That was probably what the question meant. So I can understand why he ended up getting a bit snippy with it, but for me, I think Mourinho does have problems, at Man United, and this is one of those results that I think some people are looking at and saying, well, this kind of highlights some of the problems we've had with you lately. But you also have a hell of a lot of injuries going into this, suspensions, etc. And I think the question, although it is quite innocuous, I think it was just lost in translation for me, and I think it's been blown up a bit too much.
I
agree
would
with that. Go on, Josh.
come in on that and say the reasoning that the journalist put on why he thought it was an even game was because at the end of the game, Pulis and Mourinho shared a smile together, and I think the journalist had assumed that was a kind of mutual agreement that they'd got what they both deserved out of the game, which, from watching the game, I would disagree. I think Man United were dominant, but they just came up to something that I think, as Arsenal fans, will remember a Ben Foster in absolutely remarkable form. Some of the saves that he made were absolutely world class to deny Marcus Rashford. I think his free kick late in the second half was a testament to that they were trying and they did have opportunities, but they just came up to a goalkeeper in absolutely fantastic form, and there was nothing they can really do about it. You can, continue knocking on the door, but if the goalkeeper's going to keep keeping them out, it's going to look bad for your strikers. But we've seen it from teams like your West Broms that sometimes their goalkeepers can just be absolutely inspired.
Yeah, see Fraser Forster at the Emirates for that one. Ross knows what I mean. Joel, is there what's your thoughts on Mourinho? Obviously, you see a little bit of United, I would imagine, living in the area you are, and the media, particularly the local media there, I would imagine have a very different view. One, Duncan Castles in particular is very fond of Mourinho, I think it's fair to say, inside him at times. But yes, I said that. But is it a case of Mourinho? Is this just classic Mourinho? I mean, we know what he's like. We know he's the master sort of diversion of or deflector of his team's performances. Or is there a respect level here? Because him and Pep Guardiola in particular this season have come under fire in the British press for being unnecessarily argumentative or petty or at times just very rude. And okay, the journalist may not have got the right question, but he's a very well respected BBC journalist, and I think it's just that almost disdain Mourinho gave the question when he's a man just doing his job. So where do you sort of stand on Mourinho and his ways?
I think that specific incident, I think it was a poor question, but I think what the first thing I thought of was as it kind of went on is the journalist started apologising for asking the question. Now you cast your mind to Italian press or the Spanish press, that would never happen. It's almost kind of apologetic kind of stance. I'm sorry for asking that. I shouldn't have asked that question. The question would be the question, and it'd still make him answer it. I think he's a master of deflection tactics. He's frustrated clearly because I think if you think, not knowing United's results off by heart, but I know they drew against Hull at home, they drew against Burnley at home. But if you'd have said, how is that game going to go yesterday, you'd have probably said it would probably peer out the way it did. So United will have a lot of the ball, create a lot of chances. West Brom need to ride the luck as they did, and it could end in a draw. So I don't think that's anything else. I think the question would have been better is that could United have done anything different? Could they tried something tactically different to break West Brom down? Or was it that Ben Foster's had a really good game? But I think Mourinho is frustrated. I think also Guardiola, when he kind of had that blow up, was it just around Christmas? And with the BBC in that kind of strange interview, I think that was frustration as well. And these coaches are winners, and I think 20 minutes after a game when they're still frustrated and they get asked what is a poor question, I think they just react to it. And I think afterwards, I did see the journalist tweet out that he'd spoken to Mourinho afterwards and it had been perfectly fine between them. But I think that is the rough end of the journalist's job. They're going to get the manager who's not so pleased and is contractually obliged to the interview getting the rough end of how they're feeling at that moment, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's this raging debate as to whether post-match interviews should be conducted almost like they are when the managers have had time to have a cup of tea and sit down and think about stuff rather than straight after games.
I think it's a double-edged sword because obviously following Barcelona, Luis Enrique's interviews and press conferences are absolutely mundane and boring because he says as little as possible with as less emphasis on anything. If you don't find anything out from his interviews at all, and he just goes into shutdown from day one of arriving as manager. He's not going to say anything that's controversial. He's not going to talk about referees. He's not going to talk about tactics. He'll just give what he needs to do. Now we don't want that, and I think we quite like it when a manager bites back. So we do want to keep seeing that, and we do want the journalists to keep challenging the managers. Because it's entertaining. You think of the best moments over the last 20 years when Sky do the best clips. You got your Keegan on there and Ferguson. It's brilliant and it's great. It's great TV when we see it, but they've still got to keep doing the job, I think.
Yeah. It is one of those, isn't it? It divides opinions on how people are spoken to or speak to, as you say. And we all want copy. We want stuff to discuss. But it dominated the phone lines yesterday on various phone-ins. So it's clear that some people are not happy. I must admit, I'm in the camp of I think Mourinho can be a little bit over the top. I think yesterday was one of those occasions, albeit I do agree with all of you. It wasn't the best question, which I think was probably, like you said, Joel, was probably where the apology came from. I think the sound in his voice almost went, "Oh, I've asked the wrong question. I'm really sorry," kind of thing. But he also got quite defensive, didn't he? And he said, "I'm not asking you to defend it, Jose. You can say it if you want." But yeah, it was almost that kind of cringy roll your knuckles together moment when I was watching that. But Nevertheless, one thing that cannot be disguised is Manchester United certainly missed an opportunity to pull further clear of Arsenal. Where do we begin here on our final game of the Premier League roundup? Ross, start with you on this one. 2-2 draw this afternoon with Manchester City, this afternoon being Sunday the 2nd of April, of course. There's so much to discuss here. The game itself, for me, taking my Arsenal hat off, was two very average sides who couldn't defend for toffee but quite like going forward. A tale of two sides who couldn't hold, well, one who couldn't hold a lead twice and one who really didn't do enough to win a game at home. I mean, who benefits from this result? A 2-2 draw, City's third straight draw, Arsenal's first points in weeks, or it seems like weeks anyway. Who gets the benefit of this draw, do you think, if anyone?
I don't think either club or either starting 11 does. I think the only person that gains anything from this is Arsene Wenger, and I don't mean that his job's now safe and that everything's right in the world. I just mean that if they'd lost this, it would have been nuclear. To have got a draw and to have been quite spirited, to be quite back and forth, to have had your chances but not taken them, I think there'll be Arsenal fans that will look at it now and say, you know what, I can't really blame him for that. It was just the way the game went, you know. So I think Arsene Wenger is the biggest winner from it. But in terms of the points on the board, it doesn't do anything for either of them. You know, I don't think any of them could afford to lose it given their positions in the league and the outside influences, whether it be the managerial situation at Arsenal or the title race, quote unquote, opening up with Chelsea's defeat yesterday. So it's difficult, but I think if there's any silver lining for anyone, it's probably Wenger, just in as much as there won't be any blood on his doorstep tonight.
We'll come on to that in a second. Josh, from a sort of a game perspective, would you say my comment is fair in that both sides just can't defend? I mean, City, I thought at times were hopeless defensively, and Arsenal, to be honest, much the same. The first goal, obviously, from Leroy Sané, were terrible marking from Hector Bellerin. I thought Theo Walcott's goal, I think, is played on clearly by Gael Clichy. Aguero's got, is that defensive error? I suppose you could argue it is. I think Coquelin in particular goes towards the goalkeeper rather than tries to cut it out after Mesut Ozil gives the ball away. And Shkodran Mustafi with a very good header to level it, but once again a set piece undoes Man City. So is this just a sort of a case of looking at both sides who just can't defend at the moment and are both going through a run where they're just not in form?
Yeah, I think this was expected that there'd be goals in this game because of what we've highlighted, that in this current vein of form that neither team can defend. I think just organisation of the defence from the Arsenal point of view was just completely not there, completely unorganised. No one knew what they were doing. In the second half they improved, keeping a clean sheet in the second half, but that's not it's a little bit of a silver lining to the cloud of Arsenal Football Club at the moment. But I would say that Man City have got a lot to be. I think it's 2 points dropped for City, and certainly a point game for Arsenal, especially with the way it started, because Man City were completely dominant, but it then kind of turned into a bit of a basketball match with both sets of forwards just flying up and down the field trying to score a goal. And I think in the second half it would slightly slow down and Arsenal started to dominate the midfield. But the most worrying thing I would have is the fact that Arsenal's approach play was absolutely shocking from what you'd expect from not only a Arsene Wenger team but an Arsenal team in general, that they're just overplaying and forcing the approach. And I don't think I've ever seen it that poor than we did in the whole game, to be honest, where nobody knew what they were doing. They weren't creating those triangles that you'd normally associate with a team from Arsenal that we've seen in the past 20 years, that is, pass the teams to death, and they're just not doing that at the moment. And it's more by luck than judgment that they're getting goals, because I think they were very lucky with how the ball failed to Theo Walcott for the first, and scoring from a set piece isn't something that you'd say is synonymous with an Arsene Wenger team. But overall, I think the only team that probably benefited from this result was Man United, because it just allows them to push on with their game in hand.
And also Spurs and Liverpool, arguably as well, with their positions in the table, sort of secure above. So, yeah, interesting. Joel, we have to discuss the massive Arsene Wenger shaped cloud hanging over the Emirates at the moment. I don't know if you've been on social media. Your timeline is probably clean of Arsenal fans, other than me. So,
Yeah.
God bless you for that. But there's a lot. An awful lot of videos going around Twitter this evening, in particular, of fans fighting outside the ground. There was allegations of racism, as well as obviously a lot of fans just quarrelling over the manager. Arsenal Fan TV has been at the centre of a lot of this because obviously they conduct interviews after the game where there's a lot of large crowds with differing opinions. And then, of course, you have the comments from Ivan Gazidis, Arsenal chief executive, where I don't know what context this quote was, but essentially he's made the quote that he said the club, the situational recent results dictates the need for change, or words to that effect. What's your kind of view as a completely impartial person in this? Are Arsenal fans spoiled, or do some of them have a point and they're conducting it in the wrong way?
No, I think they've got a point. And without sitting on the fence, I can absolutely see both sides of the argument for pro Wenger or against Wenger. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess, and I think this could have all been sorted if they just made the decision and announced what was going to happen. If everybody knows, everybody's on the same page, made the decision back in January or February, and then there could have been, if Wenger is to leave, it could have been towards the end of the season on a positive note to celebrate the greatest manager arguably Arsenal's ever had. Or if he's staying, then it can be for those players who are playing every week to show that they want to be at Arsenal and put in the performances. Because at the minute, do the players, put in 100%? Is Wenger going to be there? Gazidis' comment is interesting, because I think he said something like a catalyst for change. So you can read that two ways. That could either mean that it means the manager's going to go and that's a change, or it could mean that the manager's staying and they're going to clear out 9 or 10 players and have a really strong summer recruitment-wise and bring a lot of players. Only Wenger, I assume, knows the answer to that. But the longer it goes on, the longer the fans are going to get frustrated and it's going to boil over. You kind of felt today when they went 1-0 down after 5 minutes that this is going to be one of those where they get beat 4-5, the crowd are going to go wild. There's going to be protests during the game, after the game, and I think they did well to kind of get something out of the game from that respect, because it could have just been an absolute car crash for Arsenal today. But for as long as this goes on, it's just going to be the issue. And again, if that is the case of the fighting in the stadium and the stuff that you went through, that will dictate the back pages again tomorrow. And there won't be talk about the poor defending from both sides, or what was actually a decent game of football. It will all be about Wenger and should he stay or should he go, which it's like the ongoing soap opera. So it's this week's episode is this, and it'll be the same next week, I assume.
Yes, yeah, it'll just go with the tide, won't it? A positive and a negative. Ross, I'll get your thoughts on this quickly as well. I mean, there is a case for, particularly some of the videos I've seen. It was a nice hot sunny day. I think some people had a couple of light ales potentially, which probably doesn't help the situation of 4 o'clock kickoff under the in the sun, and obviously this awkwardness going around at the moment. I'm going to give you a quote from Ivan Gazidis in 2011 here, where he said, "Arsenal is accountable to the fans. They ultimately make judgment. If you're seeing the relationship between the fans and the manager break down over time, that is unsustainable." 2011 he made that quote. Arguably not a lot has changed. People are putting these sort of lorries or placards that up around the stadium now where people are seeing them. We also see, there seems to be something going on with the players. We saw Theo Walcott get substituted today. A lot of people said he had a very good game. I personally didn't subscribe to that. I thought he took his goal well and he worked hard, but I didn't think he was particularly brilliant. He visibly walked straight past the manager and indeed the coaching staff as he substituted. It was a very visual sign of discomfort, dishappiness. What's the word?
Dissatisfaction.
That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. So, does this problem run deeper? Do you think it's as deep as the players, the dressing room now? And do you think Joel's right? Is this a summer where arguably a coaching change or large scale personnel change is enough to save Arsene Wenger's job?
Ooh, I think it does run amongst the players. I don't think players can escape it. I know Iwobi said the other week that he doesn't look at the hate he gets on his Twitter feed, but I'm afraid you can't really escape it, whether it's just scrolling through your feed or whether you pick up a newspaper. You can't really get away from it anymore. And this year, I think this is the first year, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, I think, but for about 6 or 7 years now, I've watched the Arsenal fan base get steadily more angry and more upset with Arsene Wenger. And from the outside, it's been an issue brewing within the fan base that neutrals have looked at and said, "Nah, well, you're actually doing X, Y, and Z very well. I wouldn't be too angry just yet." This year feels like the first year in a long time, if even for the first time, where even the neutrals are looking at it and saying, "Yeah, you know what? This isn't right anymore. This can't go on." And to me, Arsenal fans look incredibly fatigued, whether it's by what's happening with the manager or if it's just from the infighting. It just feels like it's all gone wrong, and I think that is having an effect on the players. If it is just a case of throwing out the current 11 and bringing in new players, you don't really guarantee you're going to fix the problem, because what if those players are slow starters and need time, and the fans get on Arsene Wenger's back after 3 weeks of the new season, and the atmosphere is the same as it is now, or if it's even worse? Are the players then going to feel that, or are they going to think, "Well, are they booing me, or are they booing Arsene Wenger? What's happening here?" So it's tough. I think the best thing that can happen. It's a shame it didn't happen a couple of years ago after the whole FA Cup final, as far as I'm concerned. But I think the best thing that can happen is Arsene Wenger takes his leave. Possibly sees if Paris Saint-Germain is open in the summer. I think both you and I, Kris, kind of believe that it will be. And just find a new challenge, because I think at the moment we've reached a point where it's a natural parting, even if it's extremely painful. I think it should have been done a couple of years back after the FA Cup win against Hull, but I think now is A, the natural time to do it, and B, the most important time to do it, because if it carries on, I only see this wound getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I do think you're right. Just to speak of the thing you mentioned there about PSG, we shared some brief chat last night, didn't we, Ross, about the situation with PSG, sliding into the main pod briefly here, but there is a serious offer to Arsene Wenger to manage PSG next season. That is, I'll take that on my shoulders and say that is official as far as I understand it anyway. The offer of a lot of money, a substantial project, and an opportunity to essentially sort of go again, if you will, in his career. And that option is very much available to him. I think Unai Emery, obviously, PSG won the Coupe de la Ligue last night, which is the bare minimum they're expected to win. Even if they win all 3 domestic trophies this season in France, which I don't think they will, the talk is that the Unai Emery will be off. I don't know if you've got any. Have you heard anything about that in Spain at all, Josh? Any talk of Emery being relieved of his duties as a Spaniard? Have you heard of anything at your end?
Is that going to me or Joel? Because I don't know anything about Spanish football.
Sorry, I meant Joel. I do apologise.
No, I think the general feeling is that Emery will be let go by PSG. In terms of moving back to a Spanish club, I don't know what will be available for him that he'd see as a realistic opportunity. But I know the feeling within Spain is that Emery blew it at the new camp. So, yeah.
Go back to Valencia, maybe?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
I think Marcelino's got the Valencia job. He ex for the Real manager.
Okay. So maybe not.
Or would Emery go to Arsenal if that job's then open?
Oh, I'm not sure I'd be keen on that.
Well, I completely agree that from what I've seen of him at Paris Saint-Germain, I wouldn't be overly keen if I was an Arsenal fan. But I didn't see him in Spain. I don't know. I know his reputation's very good in Spain, but I don't know how his teams differed from how they differed to Paris Saint-Germain. But it seems to me that the problem with getting rid of Wenger now is who you're going to bring in. And to my knowledge, you're going to need to take someone from another club. And the only one I can think is going to be flat out available is probably going to be Unai Emery. So I think he's as realistic a candidate as, for example, a Ronald Koeman, who's personally my tip for the next Arsenal manager if it happens this year.
I think Luis Enrique would be a shout for Arsenal.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, Laurent Blanc is another one that's being banded around at the moment because he's completely out of work. Frenchman for Frenchman, he's very good friends with Arsene Wenger as well. Not sure it would be an appointment that would blow Arsenal fans away, to be honest. But
sorry, Kris, just to come in on Wenger. Surely this will come into his consideration, though, that if he does stay and they have a clear out of the playing squad and bring new players in, I think the real risk for Arsenal next season is that the Premier League is going to be a lot stronger. So United will spend big in the summer, so will Man City. Spurs, the young squad they've got will be a year old, and I expect Liverpool to be stronger. Arsenal have never had such a good opportunity to win the league the last probably 2 or 3 years with the strength of the league as it's been, i.e. kind of Leicester winning it last year. This year, kind of Mourinho's first season and Pep's first season in the league. I think it's an opportunity absolutely missed, and I think that Wenger could look at it and think, well, they're all going to get a lot stronger. And like you've just said, if the signs don't gel in the summer, then they're going to be even further behind in a much stronger league.
Yeah, completely agree. The FA Cup's a big thing, I think, for me. Go on, Josh.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree, except for the fact that Wenger's the only man in the Premier League in the top 6 that hasn't changed the manager in, over 2 years. So there's going to be these teams in there that are challenging for the title that are going to be having transition years. And I think if Arsenal offset themselves so that they're not having transition, they're having a transition year when the others aren't, and vice versa, they're then in that strong position to then challenge for the title in the off years.
Yeah.
Which,
I genuinely don't think the squad needs as big an overhaul as people are saying. You would think that Granit Xhaka might have learned how to tackle after a year of Premier League football. You'd like to think that Mustafi can have a break that he's needed to adjust in the summer. The dream of having Santi Cazorla fit probably is a bit of a dream at this stage, but you never know. Even players like Hector Bellerin, who's been average at best since he's returned from injury, because he hasn't looked fit to me since he's come back. I almost feel like you just need a complete summer off. There's no European Championships. There's a whole summer to rebuild. I think the biggest concern I have, even as a slightly more sort of in favour of keeping Arsene Wenger in charge type of person, if Arsenal do what they have done in previous years, where they leave their business to the very last minute and they go into a season underprepared once again, scratching around in the last few days to try and find a player. They need to get business done. They need to get it done early. They need to bed these players in earlier, get a good pre-season under their belts. I think they're going to Australia and China this year. You need that camaraderie. And I genuinely don't think the rebuild is that big. I do think Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez will be moving on. I didn't believe it at the start, but I do now. And I think they have to go big, and they have to look at potentially going through the spine of the side. New central midfielder, new central striker, new central defender, arguably a goalkeeper as well. So it's going to be a big summer, but the talk of a Max Allegri and so forth, I think, is pie in the sky. Because if you're Max Allegri and you're managing Juventus, are you looking at Arsenal and thinking, I fancy a bit of that?
I was ironically having this conversation with Drew a couple of hours ago. He was talking to me about the possibility of Allegri coming in, and he said that why would he go there when the Barcelona job's available and Arsenal aren't a big enough club anymore. And I would say that Arsenal are still a very big club. I think any big manager in the world, if the Arsenal job was available, would look at it and go, yeah, why not? But if there's any other job available, I think that's where Arsenal fall second. And I think Allegri this summer, I think he may fall foul of another big club needing a manager.
Yeah.
I think looking at the options that we had when you see other managers coming in, this is in a very similar position to Man City. There is when Pep came in, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with this club, and I think most top-level managers are egotistical enough to want to take on a project of this size, and that could be what gets Max Allegri or someone like that to contemplate that job if they feel like they want to put all that hard work in, because there is that arrogance that comes with those managers. You can see it even with Wenger. He's been known to be arrogant. Jose Mourinho is arrogant. Pep Guardiola is arrogant. They all are. It's certainly what we'll see coming in, that I think Arsenal could get a top-level manager if that manager fancies it. I think someone like Ancelotti is. Yeah, I think Ancelotti, someone like that, probably wouldn't, because he's more likely to go into a well-established club and just kick them on. Whereas we need a builder. Yeah. And I think that's where you can find someone like that who will want to come in and really establish a project.
But just on that though, if you're a manager, meeting with the Arsenal board to discuss taking the job, what is the expectation of the board?
Exactly.
What is the question? Are they saying, look, the remit is to win the league within 3 years, or is the remit just to make sure we're competitive and we attain Champions League qualification every year of your contract.
Sadly,
I
it's the
think
latter.
I think a new manager has harder targets than the current one.
Yeah.
Because of the tenure.
But it's the whole structure that needs to change at Arsenal, and I've said this for months, for years, even now. We have a man in charge in Stan Kroenke who is interested in money and money alone, and that's fine. Yeah, that's his right. He is the owner of the football club. That is entirely up to him to do. And unfortunately, this is why I have such an issue with so many of these protesters and these banner monkeys and these people that go on social media and TV shows, effing and jeffing about Arsene Wenger, because I think Arsene Wenger's a lame duck in this whole situation. I think he's been hung out to dry massively. I don't think he's been helped by some of the press, and I just don't think it's a position that is healthy, and the fans need to accept that the board is in place, accept that the manager will stay for as long as the board essentially don't want to make decisions, and when the board do make decisions, that next manager is going to be absolutely crucial. And I'll finish by saying this: I'll put my head on the block. I think Thomas Tuchel will be the next Arsenal manager, just because I think, from what I hear from Dortmund, all is not well there, and I think he's the perfect kind of mould of a manager that Arsenal would want. So there you go, Arsenal fans. If you like a bit of Arsenal talk, there's a bumper edition for you there. But we're going to move on. Because in the interest of time, we've got some EFL to get to. So this is the part of the show where I hand over to Ross, who can fill you in on the weekend's action. What's been happening, Ross?
Well, we're going to start with Leyton Orient because a lot's happened there. We spoke on the EFL special about the history of Leyton Orient and what's been happening in the past few seasons and the situation they're in now. If possible, the situation has now got worse for Leyton Orient. Danny Webb, who was their fourth manager of the season, has resigned. Omar Reza is now in charge, like I say, now fifth manager. This weekend,
Arsenal striker, by the
Omar
way.
Reza.
He is, yes.
And Danny Webb's an ex-Hull striker. So.
There you go.
Sorry, all the
Ross.
connections. I'm waiting for a Southampton man to get it next. But yes, Omar Reza is now in charge, and they hosted Wycombe Wanderers at home on the weekend. They ended up losing 2-0. They had a man sent off on the 28th minute. Both of the goals came inside a minute. Both of them are horrendous defensive errors, including the second one when the Leyton Orient defender runs into the Leyton Orient goalkeeper. And you also had fans storming Bichetti's corporate box to hang some banners and protest in his absence. So, hell of a week for Leyton Orient, and a hell of a game against Wycombe Wanderers as well this weekend. Carlisle fared a lot better. They won 2-0. It was their first goal in 8 games, so it's a fantastic result for them, puts them back into the playoff zones. Blackpool missed out on the chance to go above Luton in the playoff zones, unfortunately for them. They lost 1-0 to Luton, who I think have won for the first time in about 6 or 7 games, so that's a very big result for Luton as well. Doncaster Rovers, I think they're champions-elect at this point. They could have won it this weekend, mathematically, if X, Y and Z had happened. They managed to win their game against Grimsby 5-1, but X, Y and Z did not happen, so they now only require 3 more points to clinch promotion. And Exeter, now while we were off last week for the international break, Exeter played out an incredible game with Yeovil Town. They were 3-0 down with about 3, 4, 5 minutes to go and came back to draw it 3-3. This weekend they left it even later. They were 1-0 down to Mansfield. They equalised in the 87th minute and then got a penalty and won the game with the very last kick of the game. So an incredible week for Exeter, but that strengthens their grip on the playoffs. Into League One, I'm going to briefly mention the Checkatrade Trophy here because the Checkatrade Trophy was an all League One fixture this weekend. It was Coventry versus Oxford. Now, Oxford had been in no sort of form going into it. I think the prevailing theory was that Oxford kind of had their eyes on Wembley and weren't really paying attention to the league. And Coventry, we all know, are in a hell of a lot of trouble on the field and off the field. So they kind of saw it as their big day out. And I normally try to stay unbiased, but I think everyone in the world will be delighted to see Coventry go and win that, and they did 2-1, unless you're an Oxford fan, of course, but an excellent win for Coventry, and I'm so glad they've managed to get something out of this hellacious season they've been enduring. Suspect their relegation to League 2 is not far away, but fantastic night and day for them. Port Vale, we don't often mention Port Vale on this podcast, but they got a very big and important 2-0 win over Wimbledon, which aids their survival bid. They now have Chris Eagles over there at Port Vale, so he managed to get the second goal, and he could be about to drag them out of trouble. Millwall 3, Scunthorpe 1 is a big point, a big result near the top end of the league. That closes the gap now for Millwall to 4 points off Scunthorpe, and they have a game in hand, so that's a massive result for them. Scunthorpe's continued slip and slide out of the top two, now down into 5th. I mean, they've won 2 out of their last 5, but it's still loss, win, loss, win, loss. So strange times for Scunthorpe at the moment. And it's also worth mentioning that Peterborough got a very interesting 2-0 win themselves, capped off by one of the goals of the season from Madison. If you haven't checked it out, it's an absolute beauty at home to Charlton. So the Championship, let's wrap up here with the Championship. Kicked off on Friday with Derby County versus Queen's Park Rangers. Derby, of course, now managed by Gary Rowett. 1-0 win for Derby. Bit of a bitty game, but you can see the shoots of Gary Rowett's formula beginning to grow there at Derby, and I think it's a good match. But an excellent game to watch, and Matty Vidra with the winner. Barnsley 1, Sheffield Wednesday 1 was a big result. Big result. It was the only kick-off this weekend, and obviously if you've been listening to the EFL specials from last week, you will know that Sheffield Wednesday are in no form at all in the playoffs, and this then opened the door for Fulham. A 1-1 draw with Barnsley. Now, Barnsley fans, if you remember, Barnsley lost James Bree, Conor Hurahan and Sam Winnall in the January window, and they lost Sam Winnall to Sheffield Wednesday. So in lieu of a pig's head, the Barnsley fans decided to throw a Peppa Pig toy at Sam Winnall during this game, which is a fantastic budget way of doing it, but another brilliant story from the EFL. Aston Villa 2, Norwich 0. Norwich ended up with 10 men in that game as well, 2 goals from Jonathan Codger. Excellent result for Aston Villa, but Newcastle, Norwich still continued to slide. Brentford 2, Bristol City 0 is another bad result for Bristol City, not out of the woods yet. Brighton Hove Albion 1, Blackburn 0. Very good result for Brighton, keeps the pressure on Newcastle, but Blackburn will be very disappointed to have not gotten something out of that. Huddersfield Town, shock of the weekend. Huddersfield Town 0, Burton Albion 1. I mean, the goal did come in the 91st minute while Huddersfield were down to 10 men, but incredible that it was even that late in the game. You know, that Huddersfield should have had that wrapped up ages and ages ago, but an incredible win for Burton Albion, probably one of their biggest of the season. Ipswich 1, Birmingham 1, doesn't really do either side any favours. Newcastle 2, Wigan 1. Cut a little closer than they might have liked, but still another 3 important points for Newcastle. Preston 1, Nottingham Forest 1. Again, another issue there for Preston. They need the points if they want to get 6th, but for Nottingham Forest, another good point towards safety. Fulham went away to Rotherham United and relegated Rotherham United with a 1-0 away win. Puts Fulham up into 6th. They are now in the playoffs. Rotherham will now be confirmed to be playing League One football next season. Wolverhampton Wanderers 3, Cardiff City 1. Bit of a surprise result considering Cardiff's recent form, but an excellent result for Wolves. If you haven't seen Helder Costa's goal, I'd go and check it out because it's very, very cheeky. And then we finished the weekend off with a Reading 1, Leeds United scoreline. Reading 1, Leeds United 0 scoreline, I should say. Jan Kermigan, who announced this week that he's going to be retiring at the end of next season with the winning goal, and it was a heck of a strike as well. So, let's ask some questions. Let's talk. I'm actually going to go to you, Kris, first, because I know you also have a soft spot for Coventry City, and it's been a hell of a season for them. I think you will be as delighted as I was to see that they have won the Checker Trade Trophy, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I still can't say Checker Trade Trophy. It still sounds, I can't get my head around that one. But yeah, no, I was keeping a little eye on this one. Hard luck for Oxford, of course, because there's 2 teams in this game, of course. But goals from, I can never say this guy, Bigirimana. That's how you pronounce it, isn't it? Who I think is ex-Newcastle, isn't he?
Yes,
I think
he is ex-Newcastle and ex-Rangers.
There you go. So, he got the opener, and Thomas got what proved to be the winner with a goal back from Circum for Oxford. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic achievement for Coventry. I mean, we know what their fans have been through. 74,000 people at Wembley today as well. I mean, that's fantastic for them. Hopefully, it'll get them some much-needed revenue. It gets them a little bit of exposure. More importantly, it gets them a trophy and something to smile about. And, I'll hold my hands up and completely say I don't know all of the ins and outs of what's gone on at Coventry, but I did follow the story when they were playing at Northampton, and you really felt for their fans. And yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic achievement for Coventry. Really, really enjoyable for their fans, and just really, really good achievement for them to take home a trophy. So well done to them, and well done to their fans for turning out in such numbers as well.
Yeah, it was an excellent result for Coventry. I'm made up that they managed to win that cup, and it's a shame, obviously, for Oxford. And I try to be unbiased, but I think everyone can raise a glass to Coventry for that fantastic result. While we're in League One, Joel, I know that you know a little bit about Scunthorpe. I know it's not exactly your milieu. I know Spain is your home, but Scunthorpe, like I was saying in the roundup, they have been all over the place in recent weeks, and they've slipped from second and seemed nailed on to go up automatically. Now down into the playoffs, not really sure if they're going to manage it at the moment. What do you know about them? What's the scuttlebutt in your local area?
Yeah, so the general feeling is that they're absolutely imploding. there's a feeling that they started the season so well because the pre-season was so intense, therefore the players were so fit, yet they've kind of hit this point now and absolutely burnt out, and the manager Graham Alexander's not got a great idea of turning it around. He's basically just playing the same formation 4-4-2 every single week. And there seems to be something going on off the field as well. There was some strange thing on local radio yesterday that one of the players' wives had liked a tweet around that there's turmoil at the club and nobody speaks to each other, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So I don't think all is well at Scunthorpe, and they've got some kind of strange plan to build a stadium in 11 months, even though they've not acquired the land for it or got the planning permission. So it's very strange, Scunthorpe, what's going on. And yeah, they're dropping like a stone, and at this rate, they'll be really hard pushed to make the playoffs. And they've spent a lot on the squad as well. A lot of the players are on really good money. It's kind of gone under the radar, but they've put the chairman or / owner has put a lot of money in. And I think it'd be a massive disappointment if they don't make the playoffs. But they're in free fall. They really are.
Certainly an ambitious club for League One, but like I say, to go from second to now be in the position they're in, you do wonder if something's gone on backstage, because it's a little bit too much for it just to be an issue with the manager or form for me. Josh, then, let's finish with the Championship. A couple of teams I want to bundle together here, and you can go free for all on them if you wish. Derby County, excellent win, another good sign for Gary Rowett. Brighton Hove Albion, kind of flat to deceive against Blackburn, but another important 3 points. And Huddersfield Town may have just completely ended their hopes of automatic promotion with their defeat to Burton Albion. What did you make of those three results in particular?
I was very happy about Burton's, I think it was 96th minute winner when that went in, whilst watching final score, waiting for the Chelsea result to come in. It was a pleasant surprise as that came through. I think that basically drops Huddersfield to finishing third with their game in hand. I think they'll probably, Brighton are safe now. But going into the Brighton game, they were very lucky. I think Blackburn should have, got a bit more out of the game, but Brighton were resolute in defence, and it was a chance to see Lewis dunk with the captain's armband, and has now gone a season high of 4 games without getting booked. So that's maybe something to hold on to, that perhaps when Brighton do go up, he might be a mainstay in that defence.
Impressive.
It's certainly an impressive stat. And who was the other one? Derby County. I can't see the Derby result.
He won 1-0, didn't he? Yeah, Gary Rowett's first home game.
Yes,
first game, wasn't it? Yeah.
There we go. I thought, I didn't actually watch the game. It was a very good result for them. I think what he's doing there, he looks to be sorting the team out. Just looking from the lineups and a few highlights, that it does look like the organisation of Rowett has come in, and I think he'll steady the ship certainly this season, and they can push on next season. I'm not sure if how the resources at Derby will look and what he can do in the transfer market, because I think he might be given a cheque the size he's not necessarily used to using, and we'll find out if he's able to make decent purchases in that end of the transfer market.
The Championship continues to please people in all different ways, and so many different results coming in. It's just such a good league to follow. So Ross has sold me on that one. Josh, I know you need to scuttle from us. We've only got a couple of questions to go, so I'm going to open the door for you and allow you to move on if you wish. So thank you very much for joining us this evening, and no doubt we'll be back to you again next week.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So we will we'll let Josh go at this point, and I've got one question for each of the panelists before we wrap up today's show. So, Ross, I'm going to give you the question on TV technology, if you will, because it obviously came out this week. The France and Spain game, of course, we saw quite a lot going on in that game. Are you pro or against? Did you have any views on what you saw between the two international sides of midweek and how the system was implemented? Because now it's been trialled, it would seem to be only a matter of time before it becomes widespread and used. Would you agree?
Yes, and I would also say that it's about damn time. I think any technology that can help balance the games out is good for not just the individual games, but for the game as a whole, for the sport as a whole. So I'm all for it. I think some of the initial pushback against it is that it's not fluent yet, but that's just going to come with trial and error. It's not going to be bang smooth for the first day you use it. And I think you look at the Spain-France game in particular. If anyone watched it, then you'll know that the outcome of that game could have been drastically different if we didn't have that technology in it. I think 2 goals might have been given the opposite way had they not have had that technology. So I think you immediately saw its viability, and for me, it's just a case of smoothing out some of the rougher edges on it. I think it's definitely got a place. It just needs to be integrated into the game a little bit quicker and a bit smoother.
Yeah, fair points made, fair points there. And the question I got for you, Joel, to wrap up our show is simply this. Romelu Lukaku, we touched on him earlier on. Is he world class? If he's not, what does he have to do to be so? And do you get the impression that he's a bit of a flat track bully?
Is he world class at the minute? I'd say no. But I think there's the absolute potential to be. I've seen the stats today around kind of the element that he's not scored against the bigger teams. What would be really good is to do a comparison of how Everton fared against those teams. So is it as a team Everton are not beating the big teams, therefore he's not scoring, or vice versa? I feel like there's definitely a world-class player in there. I think if you look how old he is and how many goals he's scored and how developed he is for his age, I certainly feel if he was to move to, for example, a Man City, we would see an even better Romelu Lukaku. I think he's got all attributes. He's certainly improved his hold-up play, and his link-up play is definitely improved. I don't think working under Roberto Martinez helped, even though he's with him at Belgium. I think Thierry Henry will be a massive influence with him when he goes onto the international breaks and works with Henry. And I think working with Koeman is a good thing. But I feel if he was to move to Man City and work with a Guardiola, potentially to United and work with a Mourinho, we would see an even better Romelu Lukaku. He doesn't get the credit he deserves, and I think he's still the league's top goal scorer. And he's got everything. He's got everything a modern player needs. So I just think put him in the right team. Put him in Spurs' team instead of Harry Kane. Would he have scored the same amount of goals as Harry Kane? Probably, because he's done it with Everton. So I think you put him in that bracket for certain. But it's difficult for him to get to the very top because only a certain few players do. But I certainly feel there's a player there. But it does massively divide opinion. And scoring against the bigger teams is something he has to do, be it in not a top 6 team or not. He has to start stepping up and doing that. But did he get a clear chance created for him yesterday? I don't think he did. So that is an issue with him staying at Everton. Is he going to get the opportunity to showcase what he can do on the bigger stage?
Yeah, it does appear like he might be on the move at the end of the season. We shall see if that indeed materialises. But yes, it's a question I get asked a lot, so I had to get your views on that one. Okay, we are going to wrap the show then. One quick plug: we've got our good friend Korosh Musavi. If you're listening to this, Korosh, I haven't ignored your email. I promise. I've seen it. Korosh wants to write a piece on us, or for us, I should say, with regards to fan bases, and have a look at sort of fan regimes and how they're dealt with, and how fan influence can change a club or the way that a team provides, or the way a team performs, I should say, on the big stage. He's written a piece on Schalke, which I'll be looking to get up this week. So thank you for that, Korosh. I shall get that edited and put up, and I think he's going to write a piece on Arsenal as well with their fan base. It'll be interesting to compare the two. So do have a look out for that. Also to plug, the regular podcast is back tomorrow. Joel, you'll be on with myself. I believe Drew and John will be with us. I hope so anyway, otherwise it'll just be me and you nattering away. But I think so. And of course you'll have I'll have yes, Lorient have won another game. It happened today, so I'll be able to talk about that. I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about in Spain as well, Joel, tomorrow. So I see Valencia won a game again today at home, so we can touch on them. And of course, all the big stories from across La Liga will be covered in tomorrow's pod as well. And Ross, you'll be back with me this time next week. I think it's another Sunday goes past. We've got midweek action to talk about next week, haven't we? So
I should also say, if you're interested in Championship football, there's 2 Championship games on TV on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I forget which one's off the top of my head, but I think one of them is Rotherham versus Sheffield Wednesday. I think that's the Tuesday fixture. But yeah, there's some games on to watch as well this week.
Yes, I'm toying with the idea of you and I doing something in midweek, but obviously we'll see how our schedules align and see what we can do. But it'll probably just be a 2-man show if we do it. But stay tuned to our podcast feed, which is on Twitter, of course, at the FH Podcast, and you can find us on SoundCloud and on YouTube and on the internet via our website. I'm missing one: YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, of course. Yes, you can find us at all the usual places. So have a little look, have a little download if you haven't listened to our EFL special, which might have gone a little bit under the radar possibly during the international break. Do give it a listen. Myself, Josh and Ross were having a good old natter about the EFL and this season as a whole, particularly Championship focus, so give that a look, and keep the feedback coming. We didn't really answer too many listener questions this week because we wanted to talk a little bit more in depth and put out a bit of a longer podcast this week. So seeing as you've all missed us, I'm sure, while we've been away, so keep the feedback coming. My thanks, of course, to Josh, who's left us, and of course to Ross. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure as ever.
And to Joel for your debut. Thank you very much, Joel.
No worries, thank you.
And as I say, main pod will be back after Tuesday. That will be released, so do tune in for that. But until then, enjoy your football, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy, enjoy the midweek action, and we will be back very soon.